After 17 months of working and living in Australia, I feel somewhat qualified to be able to provide a bit of information on the things that you might want to know if you're thinking about coming to Australia, or even if you're already here. So if that's either one of you, you might want to do yourself a favour and continue watching. Hi, if you're new around here, I'm Rosie, one half of CNR Travels. About 2 years ago, my partner and I travelled to Southeast Asia for about 6.5 months. And since October 2023, we've been in Australia. If you're someone like me who loves to plan, loves to research to a T, then this will be perfect for you, and I will put timestamps just to help you out if some of them aren't relevant. So first things first, what do you need to know about the visa? And there's 3 points that I've got for this. The first one is you need to know the visa type. For a working holiday visa, there are 2 options depending on where you're from. The subclass 417 is what we have and is available for a large majority of European countries, whereas the subclass 462 covers a mixture of countries from the US to Spain to Thailand. This will allow you to work and live in Australia up to 2 to 3 years. In the UK, we're very lucky that we're able to extend our visa up to 3 years. So the first time we bought our visa, it came to about $635 per person, and that was back in September 2023. In July 2024, we bought our second year, which was $650, so it had gone up since the last time. And they usually tell you to give yourself about 3 months for processing time, but the last one that we got, it happened in about an hour. Number 2 is an obvious one. If you're applying for a working and living visa, they expect you to work. And the third one is when we applied for our first visa, they asked us, and this is the government, asked us to complete a health examination back in the UK. So basically, because we'd been traveling prior, they wanted us to be just double checked. And it's not cheap. So it came to about £300 each to get this done. Since then, which was back in September 2023, it now is, in March 2025, the same amount. If you are asked to do this examination, do note that only specific doctors do it. So we had to drive about an hour and a half to be able to get this done. So the next part of this video is going over all the things that you need to do once you've arrived in Australia. And I mean the first couple of days to a week, getting this sorted to help you have a smooth running introduction to the country. So number 1, you need to grab a TFN number, which is your tax file number. And it's super easy to do. You just go onto the website and then fill everything in. You won't be able to get a job until you have this. Number 2, make sure you're sorting out a bank account. A majority of people that I know have either an ANZ bank account or a Commonwealth bank account. This will allow you to get paid into that account from your job, but also it avoids you having to pay charges for conversion. Number 3, an obvious one, you want to be getting yourself a SIM card, and you will also need to get that SIM card to sort out a bank account. You either want to be going for the top 2 in the country, which is either Optus or Telstra. They do say that if you go into more remote areas, Optus works better in some areas and Telstra works better in others. So what we've done is I have Telstra, Charlie has Optus, so if in doubt, we have some sort of signal or communication. Number 4, you want to sort out a Medicare card. The main reason you'll need a Medicare card is to be able to go to the doctors. I'm assuming, unless it's a really big charge, that you don't pay anything. I did go to the doctors the other week and I had to pay half of the amount that was given, and then the other half was covered by Medicare. And then, as well as similar to England, you pay for prescriptions, and I'm paying roughly about $13 for like a 3-month batch of medication. You can either complete this online and then email it through, or you can go in person to a Centrelink or a government site and they will be able to help you with that. Do note that you usually have to take quite a lot of documents in terms of ID. So make sure you're taking your passport, any driving license you have, anything else that might be able to help you get that. Oh, and make sure that if the expiry is coming up soon, sort that out, because it can be an absolute hassle if it's expired and then you're trying to figure it out. We went through it, we learned our lesson, we will not be doing it next year. And number 5, it may be relevant to some of you, not all of you, but if you're planning on driving around Australia, you need to grab yourself a driving license. So in each state, you can drive up to 3 months on your home country driving license, but after those 3 months you need to ideally have a license. I think it's a little bit more complicated for countries that are non-English speaking countries, because your driving license isn't in English. What I do know is if you are someone from an English speaking country, they look at your driving license and they can provide you a driving license as soon as possible. Alternatively, you can complete an application online. For me, I have had 2 in the last 2 years. So I had one in Queensland and I have one now in New South Wales. To be able to get this sorted, you need to go into that state service centre. So in Queensland, it's called Department of Transport and Main Roads, and then in New South Wales it's New South Wales Services. So you can buy from a year's driving license up to 10 plus years, but I've done it as years just to make it a little bit easier. So the price I paid in Queensland was about $89, but in New South Wales I paid about $70 for the year. So whilst we're on the subject of driving, I thought I'd go on to speak about buying a car and how you go about getting ownership of that. So if you are not thinking about driving or buying a car, feel free to use the timestamp to skip this part. So finding a car is pretty easy. It is, however, a little bit more difficult finding one that's cheap, reliable, and perfectly fits what you're looking for. And that's especially the case if you're looking on Facebook Marketplace. Not to say don't trust it, but from our own experience, it's not something that you should solely look into. And that's coming from someone who bought a van and then 2 weeks later it blew up. I'd highly suggest looking at a car dealership for 2 reasons. Is 1, they come with a warranty, but also 2, it gives you a rough idea of how much you should be paying for said car/van. So when looking for a car, you need to consider a few things. And the first thing is, where do you intend on driving it? So if you're thinking about going to NT and going quite rural or WA, then a 4x4 is your best option. But if you're someone thinking, I just want to go from city to city, small car will be your best bet. And then you need to consider what its purpose is. So is it purely going to be something that drives you around the country, or are you wanting to live in it? So that will be the difference of just a standard car or a camper van. So once you figure out those 2 things, you can now look on car dealerships and Facebook Marketplace for the type of van or car that you would like to buy. And when you're looking at any descriptions, you want to make sure it definitely has 2 things. So the first one is a rego. A rego is a registration that includes a third-party insurance as well as a registration of the car. It's not immediately needed, but if you can find one, it's a lot easier on you and on your wallet. The next thing that you need is an RWC, which is a roadworthy certificate. And this is an absolute must, especially where we have been in Queensland and New South Wales. You can't buy ownership of it unless it has been done. This also is something that's important because it makes sure that someone has looked over it, double checking that it's a-okay. The registration can be paid on a month, 3 month, 6 month and 12 month. And if you're short on money, you can just add on another month or 3 or however you want to work it out. The RWC, however, is not a mandatory annual thing. In the UK, we have to have something called an MOT, which is pretty much the same, but it just means a roadworthy is only needed if you're buying or selling. So it might mean that someone might not have that serviced for many, many years. Do also note that some states, it's not mandatory to have a RWC to sell, but I would suggest just getting one for peace of mind for yourself. Which then brings me on to say, if you are not savvy with cars like myself, it is highly, highly, highly recommended to get a mechanic to check over the car that you're looking at buying, especially if it's on Facebook Marketplace, because those people can be a bit dodgy. Once you've found one that ticks all the boxes, you then buy it. So you need to go into, again, the relevant centres to be able to do that. Like I said, in Queensland, it's Department of Transport and Main Roads, and then in New South Wales, it's New South Wales Services. I don't know what it is in the other places, but it should be very, very easy to find that out. Like I said previously, we bought a van and it blew up, and now we have our now van. Unfortunate for us, but lucky for you, it means that I can explain what it's like changing a registration from Queensland to Queensland or Queensland to New South Wales. So the first van that we brought in Queensland, and it already had a registration in Queensland. So it's a lot easier to do it that way. It means that you have to go to the centre and you need to fill in a form. And the form is a vehicle registration transfer application, which is an F3 520. But again, if you go into the centre and just say, can I transfer it? They give you the piece of paper and it'd be nice and easy. Make sure that when you're filling this form in, that the owner, the current owner, comes in with you, because you'll need a little bit of information from them as well as a signature. Once you've filled that form in, you'll then have to pay an amount of money. We paid around $122 to be able to transfer the ownership, the processing fee or stamp duty, and 6 months registration. Our second and current van that we bought had a New South Wales registration. Buying it in Queensland means that we're not transferring, but we're creating a new ownership. For this, the seller has to either cancel their registration, or if it's run out, then perfect, they don't have to do anything. And then you, as the buyer, fills out another form. And then the form for this one is vehicle registration, which is an F3 518. And luckily the seller isn't needed for this, because it's, again, created as a new registration, almost like it's a new car. However, doing it this way can be very, very expensive, which we now again have learned our lesson, maybe not to do it next time. So for 12 months registration plus the processing fee or stamp duty was $1,026. I have been told, however, that New South Wales is just more expensive, so that's maybe a factor, but my God. Okay, so the main event, how does working in Australia work? So when it comes to working in Australia, there are generally 3 types of contracts that will be given out. So you've got full-time, part-time, and casual. And as a backpacker, you will probably go down as casual. There are pros and cons of a casual contract. The pro is that you generally get more money than someone who's on a part-time or full-time contract, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you've got that set hours, like that stability. In our previous job, Charlie was put on a part-time contract and I was on a casual. So the way that the casual contract works is that the flat rate, so in this case, Charlie's $24, and then on top of that, you get casual pay, which in this case is $6. In our now current jobs, we're both on casual contracts. So Monday to Friday, we get paid $32.25 per hour. And what's really amazing about Australia is that they really, really value their weekends. so you get paid extra on Saturday and Sunday. On Saturday, you get a 25% increase, and on Sunday, you get a 50% increase. So on Saturday, we get paid $38.70 per hour, and on Sunday, we get $45.15 per hour. I don't know if they do it in all places, but in this specific company that we're working at, you get additional payments here and there. So if I work after 7 p.m, I get an additional $2.72 per hour. We also get an allowance per fortnight to wash. So for laundry purposes, we get $12.50. And what is, again, the most amazing thing about Australia is, like I said, they really value their weekends, which also means that they value their public holidays. And on public holidays, they get an additional increase of 125%. So you know we're working on those days. On casual contracts, there isn't a set, like, this is the amount of hours that you can go up to. It's relatively flexible. If they have the hours and you are willing to do it, you can do as many hours as you want. Although there may not be a limitation on how many hours you do, a lot of workplaces, like the one that we are on at the moment, don't like you going over like 38 hours a week, because that means that they have to pay overtime. This isn't to say that they're not going to do it, because I have had that before and I got $50 an hour. The visa has some limitations, however. When you apply for the visa, it will say there's a limitation of 6 months. However, this is only for certain jobs. But if you are one of these categories, you're all good to go. So the categories are different locations for the same employee, as long as you work in any one location, does not exceed 6 months. Plant and animal cultivation anywhere in Australia, natural disaster recovery work anywhere in Australia, critical sectors anywhere in Australia, and certain industries including fishing and pearling, tree farming and felling, construction, mining in Northern Australia only. The one that we want to specifically hone in on is the critical sectors. So if you read under it, it gives you loads of information about what ones are included, but luckily for backpackers like us, one of the main things are hospitality and tourism. So you can stay in this up to 6 months or more if you are happy in that location, or if you're needing just a hell load of money. On another note, previously, you would have heard people talking about completing 88 days. Usually a lot of people go for farm work, and what that does is it helps you extend your visa to your second visa, and then second to third. From July the 1st, 2024, that's no longer the case, and you can get a visa, so your second or third visa, without having to complete that. Oh, and the age restriction used to be from 18 to 30, but it's now 18 to 35. So job necessities, and in England you need certain certificates to be in certain workplaces. For example, when I was a teacher, I had the certificate of a DBS, which allowed me to work with children. The same applies in Australia, and that is called WWCC, or the blue card. In Australia, they do have jobs as well where a certificate is needed. And I'm gonna say that they ask for a certificate for nearly all jobs. To be able to do the job that I'm currently doing at the moment, where I work in food and beverage and I serve alcohol, I needed to get an RSA, which is a responsible serving of alcohol certificate. In my last job where we worked on the Gold Coast, I needed an RSA, and that came to a cost of like $22, which you do online. And then I'd done the same one because for some unknown reason, New South Wales isn't included on that specific one. I needed to do an RSA for New South Wales, and that came to about $140. If you're unsure of where to look for jobs, the two best sites are Indeed and Seek. I've said it once and I'll say it again. The best way that I feel you can find a job in Australia as a backpacker is by taking in a paper CV, having a little chat with the person, getting familiar with them, and that is just the best way of doing it. So the next thing you might want to know is about tax return. So this will be, again, a chunk of money taken out of your pay, depending on how much you're getting. Roughly, I'm getting about £2,000 over a fortnight, and about 400 of that goes to tax. Similarly to the UK, you can redeem or get a rebate for that tax, but it is a lot more difficult to do than it is in the UK. So you need to fill in a form that enables you to get that rebate. The process itself isn't very difficult, but it definitely involves a lot of patience. So the first thing that you need to do is create a MyGov account, and you can then link up everything that you need for your tax return. This will give you a title that says Australian Taxation Office. You can then link onto it. We did, and you probably will have to, is ring up and get a linking code. That will then allow you to go through. So anything that's linked to your tax file number, which I spoke about quite a while ago now, that will then pin up all the work that you've done and any tax taken over the year. If you're missing a workplace on there, it means that your company hasn't done it. So it's a waiting game for you. Once you've logged it all and it gets submitted, you then wait for a confirmation on whether or not you're going to get that tax back. Ours took a week. The cut-off date for us, so in 2024, was the 31st of October, so make sure you're doing that before that. It does open, I'm pretty sure, about July time, so you've got plenty of time to sort that out. I believe if you don't do it on time, you may have to forfeit a portion of that money. The next and final thing on pay is if you are getting pay slips, you'll find something called a super on it, and what that is basically an amount of money that is going towards your pension. I don't know too much about this, but what I do know is once you've left Australia and you're no longer doing that visa, you can claim that super back, but I don't know how that works. Okay, so if you've made it this far, I want to say thank you so much, because that is a lot of information and a lot of geeky information. Now, if you are looking at what it's like living in Australia, we have a few videos that you can view. If you want to hear a little bit more of the reality versus the expectation of what it's like working and living in Australia, I suggest checking out this video. If you want to check out what it was like for us living in a camper van for the first time as a couple who had never done it before, and let me tell you, it was not pretty. This is the video that you want to go check out. And if you want to see what it's like working in Australia on a farm, I'm going to suggest checking this one out. And if you stay tuned, in a couple of months, I'm going to say roughly around the beginning of May, I'm going to be uploading a video about renting in Australia, about the cost, how you go about doing it, and again, more hassles of renting. Once again, thank you for watching, and give us a like, give us a subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.